income guarantee. Canada is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. There's absolutely no need for the poverty that we see in so many of our communities. So, and then the last point, I'll just say, we want to make every vote count. We have to reform our democracy. So many people are not voting. So many people have turned away from the system. We can make it more compassionate. Thank you so much.
Next, with the 3-minute opening statement, is Dugald Lamont.
Thank you so much. I'm Dugald Lamont. I'm leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party. I'm running to be the MLA for St. Boniface. It's really great to be here at Disability Matters Votes. This is an incredibly important issue for me, for my party. It has been for a long time. My colleague, Dr. John Gerard, the former leader, has always been an incredible champion when it comes to the rights of folks with disabilities in Manitoba. And we know that you face extraordinary challenges and have for a very long time. And look, we knew that before the pandemic. One of the things that happened during the pandemic is that it really showed how broken many of our systems already were. It broke some systems, but it also showed really what the failings were. And we have to make sure, as we're moving forward, we think that this is a time, while we're still in the shadow of the pandemic, now is the time to make the changes we need to rebuild and shore up and make sure that people are being cared for. You know, my uncle, my mother's only brother, had MS. All my memories with him, I remember him walking with difficulty, and eventually it left him unable to care for himself. And there needs to be a fundamental commitment to human dignity and to the dignity of every single person. And that's something that we as Liberals believe in. That's a foundational bedrock principle of our party. So one of the things we've proposed, we want to make sure, of course, that you can get around, that we have accessible infrastructure, accessible building standards. But today we re-announced our commitment to MINCOME, to making sure that people with a disability in Manitoba have a guaranteed annual income. That's absolutely critical for us. The other is there are cases where individuals have to leave their families because their supports depend on what their family income is. We're going to change that as well. And we also have created or are proposing a $150 million voluntary jobs program so that people can get work when they want to do it. It'd be a question of, again, it's voluntary. It's not something you have to do, but to make sure that those people who want to work can, that people who have the incomes they need to care for themselves, but also making sure that we're caring for those caregivers. Because some of the most difficult and heartbreaking stories I've heard were from families of folks who were disabled, parents of children who wanted to make sure they were properly cared for, knowing that it was very difficult because caregivers aren't really paid enough, and making sure that there's a stability there too. So we're making all those investments. This is an incredibly important election, and I really hope that you consider us as Manitoba Liberals. This is, as I say, a core to what we stand for. Thank you.
Our final opening statement, 3 minutes, Rochelle Squires.
Thank you very much, Marcy. And it is a real honor to be on this stage with my esteemed colleagues and to be here with all of you. And I would echo the sentiment that I do believe that one of the strongest grassroots campaigns that I've ever witnessed has come from you folks. And I just want to congratulate you for all of your advocacy and your tireless efforts to make sure that everybody in this province is aware of the campaign and that politicians are taking note of the campaign and taking action to ensure that everybody with disabilities have the opportunity to live a dignified life in the province of Manitoba. We all know that disabilities affects at least 1 in 6 Manitobans, and I would argue that that number is probably even higher, and that we as a society need to unanimously move forward on ensuring that everybody has the right to achieve their fullest destiny in Manitoba and live freely in community and receive the supports that they need to live in community. One of the actions that our government has taken in the last few years is announcing the closure the permanent closure of the Manitoba Developmental Center, as well as the transition of Saint Amant away from a developmental center to a health agency, so that for the first time in over 100 years, Manitoba has no developmental center and that everybody can live freely in community. As your minister for the last 3 years, it was a tremendous honor to make those decisions, to also to make those official apologies and to settle that lawsuit for those who were wronged by policies and initiatives in the past. And we hope on a go forward basis that we never make those same mistakes again and build a better community. So then that leads me to community living disability services. And again, it's been a real honor to be working with all of you and to hear your voice, your tireless advocacy. I'm very honored that I have a special advisor, Jessica Croy. I don't know if you're here, Jessica. My eyes are scanning for you, but a big debt of gratitude to you for always coming into my office, not pulling any punches, telling me exactly what is needed. And Jessica, with your help, we have delivered on many of those key priorities that you have brought forward on behalf of your community members. In 2019, on this very stage, or at this very debate, our leader, Heather Stephenson, was the family's minister at that time, and she made 3 solid promises to you: increased disability services, new income support program, and increased benefits for disability services. And we've delivered on all of those 3 initiatives as a first step, and we have more to go, but really looking forward to a very bright future with disability matters forefront in everyone's mind in Manitoba. Thank you very much.
Candidates, you can tell you've been on the trail for a while. Nobody needs the bell today at all. Thank you very much for opening statements. We'll now move to our first priority issue. I'll outline the issue. Someone in the front row will rise, identify them. This has been previously decided. A microphone will move to that person and questions will be posed. And when we turn to candidates, you will have 2 minutes of time to respond. The first priority issue that we will cover this afternoon relates to accessibility, a basic human right enshrined in international, national, and provincial laws. The Manitobans living with disabilities continue to face barriers that prevent their full participation. Landmark legislation called the Accessibility for Manitobans Act, the AMA, was passed in 2013. It passed with unanimous all-party support and promised to make significant progress in removing barriers within a decade. By this year, 2023. While initially much heralded, the implementation of the AMA has been, to many in our disability communities, a major disappointment. Barrier-Free Manitoba, for example, gave implementation efforts a failing grade of D in their most recent 2022 midterm report, and as covered in their report card, progress has been slow. The recent steps were taken that actually diminished the AMA's effectiveness as well, limiting accessibility responsibilities by 95% of Manitoban organizations, narrowing the scope of the built environment standard so that it no longer includes buildings, failing to establish an effective system to monitor, report on, and enforce AMA rules. 10 years after the passage of the Act, a 2023 Probe Research poll found that 40% of people who run businesses in Manitoba do not understand the AMA, nor do they know they have a legal responsibility to remove barriers. Our question from the floor, please. Our questions for the section.
Thanks, Marcy. Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Mankiewicz, and I've been heavily involved in disability advocacy across Manitoba on a number of issues. My questions for you are, what will your party do to strengthen the implementation of the AMA and ensure timely and significant progress towards an accessible Manitoba? How will your party ensure the timely and comprehensive prevention and removal of barriers in facilities, buildings, and structures? And how will your party ensure that disabled people are meaningfully consulted on all matters related to the AMA? Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. You'll each have 2 minutes to respond to the question. If you need a restatement of any part of that, I have them in front of me and you can request that. We, as mentioned, have order for this response. This time, the first person to answer will be Janine Gibson from the Green Party of Manitoba. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm the leader of the Green Party of Manitoba, also running in the constituency of Wolseley. The Green Party and a Green MLA will ensure that there is much broader education on the AMA. We have basically good legislation that's not being implemented, that's not being educated. People don't know their responsibilities. So massive education around what we need to do. The legislation is there. I understand it's pretty good. I need to educate myself more on it myself. But I know as someone who has mobility issues that there are many, many businesses that don't understand their responsibilities. So we need to have funding for the education. Yes, it's there, but we need a transparent implementation process against a public timeline so that we can see, we have something to measure. How are we making progress on this? So first point, educate about the AMA, develop a transparent public timeline with measurable accomplishments that we can work towards that's funded. And then in terms of accessible buildings, not only do we have to make our buildings more carbon neutral, so funding for the implementation of moving towards accessibility and carbon neutrality at the same time. Again, our basic platform of green jobs for a sustainable future would address this concern by ensuring that our buildings become more carbon neutral as well as more accessible. And yes, the Green Party and a Green MLA will work hard in a collegial manner with whatever existing parties are ruling to ensure that we implement something called a citizens assembly process. We have 2 ears to listen twice as much as we speak. And the Green Party is committed to listening and implementing what you've already told us you need. Thank you.
Thank you. That's time. The next to respond to the question, you have 2 minutes, is Dougal Lamont of the Manitoba Liberal Party.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, it is very disappointing. The AMA has not been enforced and it's also been weakened. So what we need to do is to strengthen it in a number of ways. First of all, by making sure it applies to all building construction, inside and out. In speaking with major disability advocates, there was an individual who helped actually make sure the disability was part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, who we met with. He said, we have to start integrating universal design into the design at the beginning. It should be baked in and be something that's taken as a given. Because too often what happens is people will say, or an architect or an engineer will design a building and then they'll come along and say, okay, now you have to put something onto it to make it accessible. It needs to be accessible from the get-go. The other thing about it is that regulation is important, but we also need to make sure that there's resources there. There are going to be, one of the reasons there's going to be pushback is if people feel that they can't afford it. So we have to create grants and funds to actually make sure that businesses, to help them comply. To give them an advantage so that there's actually, it makes it even more worth their while to comply and to make sure that this is happening. And again, to make sure that this is all happening, that we're consulting to see what is happening, what isn't on an ongoing basis with the community, to make sure that what is being promised is what is actually being implemented. And that's our commitment.
Thank you. And that's within time. The next to respond to the question, and you have 2 minutes, is Rochelle Squires from the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba.
Thank you very much. And one of the commitments that I'm prepared to make today is that within 30 days, a newly re-elected PC government would release the 5-year report that was undertaken. As part of the act, we must conduct a 5-year review, and we will release that, as well as within 180 days, we will provide a full status update on the implementation and the successes of those 5 standards, which include the 3 that were fully implemented under our government over the last few years, which include the accessible customer service standard, the accessible employment standard, and the accessible information and communication standard, as well as I would provide a full update on the 2 accessibility standards that are currently in works right now. One is for the transportation, and of course, one is for the design of public outdoor spaces. One of the things that we heard loud and clear from everyone in community was that we needed to help others, whether it be public businesses, retail stores, or other entities, to adapt and modernize to make their place of business more accessible. That is why we launched 2 years ago, the Manitoba Accessibility Fund, which is a $20 million commitment that is being maintained by the Winnipeg Foundation and other partners. And each year there's at least almost $1 million that can go towards projects on an application base. This year we were oversubscribed, not surprisingly, which is helping raise awareness from all the applicants about their need and the law to modernize to standards. And we were able to select 42 organizations to receive grants that will modernize their space. And that is following the inaugural year's launch of 30 organizations throughout the province of Manitoba that were supported with $756,000 to make their spaces more accessible. More work to do, and certainly giving that commitment that we would do it.
Stuck there. You're right on the bell. You're right on the bell. Thank you. And the final candidate to speak to this question, our first priority section, is Nahani Fontaine from the NDP. You have 2 minutes.
The Manitoba NDP were really proud to introduce and pass the Accessibility for Manitobans Act back in 2013. It illustrates the commitment of the NDP to work with and ensure that, again, we have a Manitoba that is accessible and that every Manitoban can thrive and has equal opportunities. And so, like the folks that we've heard from, we are equally disappointed that the AMA has been effectively watered down or weakened by the current PC government. One of the things that they did was that they weakened the standards from regulations. So employers with 50 staff, now it goes down to 24 staff. You know, Manitoba has a best practice, and that is through the AMA. There's a legislative framework to ensure that Manitobans with disabilities have accessibility in our province that everybody deserves and has demanded. And the NDP was working with the community to ensure that AMA was strengthened and that it did what it was intended to do. And unfortunately, like I said, it's been weakened and watered down. And I think that a really good point is that there aren't a lot of businesses that do understand what their responsibilities are in respect of AMA. And unfortunately, we find that a lot with government programs because there's not really a public awareness campaign. And so the Manitoba NDP will work in partnership and in respect of consultation and how AMA can be strengthened. And under a WOB Canoe NDP administration, provincial government departments and agencies will prepare, update.
Thank you, Nahani Fontaine. That is the 2 minutes up. And I do have a stopwatch. I'm just letting everyone know and making sure we're completely fair. And thank you, candidates. I know we're trying to keep it tight. We can have a round of applause for all of the candidates answering the first section. We're on to our second section. Again, I will outline as the organizers have written out the issue. We will go to the floor for a question, and then we will have responses. 2 minutes each. You may respond or rebut something you have heard, if that's the agreed upon format. 2 minutes each. And the order of response will be Dugald Lamont, Rochelle Squires, Nahani Fontaine, and Janine Gibson. Our second priority this afternoon, our second priority issue relates to the critical role that direct support workers play in the lives of tens of thousands of Manitobans living with disabilities. The Manitobans requiring services deserve to be supported by well-trained and qualified staff who are paid a fair living wage. However, disability support workers have long been one of the province's lowest paid human service workers. The low wages have resulted in high staff turnover, staff shortages, burnout, high vacancies, long wait lists, and limited continuity of care. Many more community-based organizations faced critically high staff vacancies during the pandemic than ever before. In this year's budget, the government has made a commitment to increase the average hourly wage for many frontline staff to $19, and many organizations say it represents a significant step forward. But it's just a start. With the wage increase, those staff workers will still earn less than staff who have similar responsibilities working in other human service sectors. The average wage increase only applies to those frontline paid staff paid through 2 of the government's many disability funding programs. And there is no comprehensive training strategy for support workers to ensure quality standards and career advancements. Candidates to the floor for our question.
Good afternoon. My name is Javed Marcus, and I'm a direct support professional. My questions for all parties today are, will your party commit to an increase over the next 3 years of $21, $23, and $25 for an average wage for disability support workers? Will your parties work towards similar average hourly wage increases for all frontline disability support workers, personal care attendants, and home care workers with similar responsibilities? Will your party work with organizations and stakeholders in the overall disability sector to develop and implement a competency-based training system? Thank you.
Candidates, you each have 2 minutes to respond. I can reframe questions if you need. And we begin this round with a response, 2 minutes from Dougal Lamont.
Thank you. I will say yes to all three. We will commit to increasing over the next 3 years of $21, $23, and $25. We will work towards a similar hourly average hourly wage increases for all frontline disability support workers. And we will work with organizations and stakeholders to make sure that we're implementing a competency-based system. This is something we met with the parents of adult children with disabilities who expressed this exact concern to us a number of years ago. And it was one of the most moving and powerful meetings that I've ever had as an MLA, because it's very clear that you have parents who are just worried about their loved ones. They're worried about their kids. They're worried about the ones that make sure they want to be safe. And there are serious issues, as they pointed out. To be a disability support worker, you only have to have grade 10. You can be not prescribing, but giving out medications that nurses are not allowed to. So people are handling sometimes very powerful medications, and they're underpaid, and there's huge turnover. And the result of that is a breakdown in care through no fault of anyone's. It's because there are workers who love the job, want to keep doing it. So we need to make sure that they can keep doing the job they can at the best quality they can, make sure people are properly qualified. But that provides the stability, the essential stability that's missing in the system. And it'll actually reduce costs in the end, because if we can get people in and it's something that people can make a career, if people can afford to pay their bills and pay their rent and take care of people, that'll be what makes the difference, because we're losing good people from the system because they simply can't afford to pay their bills, even though they love their work. So this is a major priority for us as a party. Thank you.
Rochelle Squires is next to respond. 2 minutes for response or rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Most of the disability support workers that I've had the pleasure of meeting have been drawn to the field because of love and love for their jobs and love for serving the people that they are working with. But we heard very loud and clear that the wages were inadequate. When we formed government, those wages were around $12 or $13 an hour, and they hadn't been increased in several years. 2 years ago, we were very pleased to take what I had referred to at that time as an initial step at moving the wages, the baseline, to $15 an hour. And then just this past year in budget 23, we made the historic investment of $82 million to bring those wages up to $19. And of course, at that time, there again, I said it was a second step, and we are very excited to take those next steps. A re-elected PC government would continue to work with all of you and listen to all of you and ensure that we're moving up with a guaranteed minimum of getting to $23 an hour by 2026. We are also committed to establishing that framework. Some of that work is underway right now with the service purchase agreements that we have, the relationships that we have from those that we're procuring services from in the Department of Families, ensuring that they have an opportunity for career laddering within their entities. But we know more work needs to be done, and we're committed to that framework, as well as having those quality standards within, so that everybody can be assured of the service being delivered in the ways that the standards call for, and then giving opportunity for those workers in this field to achieve their career goals and be fairly compensated for it.
Thank you. Nahani Fontaine is next to respond. You have 2 minutes.
The Manitoba NDP respects and values frontline workers in the disability sector, and we know that many of them have not received a fair deal in the last many years. In fact, wages have been frozen from this current PC government that we've had for the last 7 years. And we know, as my colleague has said here, we've had lots of conversations with parents who very graciously share their concerns and their worry with us. And it is heartbreaking to hear of the stress that many families are under, especially as parents start to age and they worry about their child and the supports that their child may or may not have. And so, you know, we understand how important that disability support workers are in the lives of Manitobans, and also to relieve the stress that a lot of families are under. We know that the work of disability support workers is more than work, and I would agree with my colleague that a lot of disability workers do it out of love, but unfortunately, love doesn't pay the bills. And so I am excited to announce that the Manitoba NDP will increase wages for disability support workers. This will go towards supporting the retention and recruitment of Manitobans to do this very critical frontline work with Manitobans. This will also help to reduce turnover that we see within the disability support workers community, so that we can have folks that will have a career and that can be in doing this work long term, and that can work in partnership with families and communities to do the work that we need to do to ensure that Manitobans, all Manitobans, again, can thrive and have the opportunities that they should be afforded.
Thank you. And our final response to our second set of issues and questions will be Janine Gibson. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, McWitch. Yes, a Green MLA and Green MLAs will support the Green Party of Manitoba's policies to honor the service that frontline workers share with their community. And that means acknowledging that $19 and $21 an hour is not sufficient. It's not a living wage in today's reality. So we definitely would work collegially with our governing party to ensure that we get to that $25 an hour mark, which we think is more reflective of the baseline where support workers doing this crucial frontline work should be earning. As well, we believe that we have to have increased support for all home care and all frontline workers. And that means quality of life as well, quality of the work environment and supports for that, not just the dollarly wage. Yes, our current system, we need that, but there are other ways that we can show respect and improve retention. So again, listening, reading the reports that have already been generated, paying more close attention to them, and looking for the opportunities to build in compassion into our bureaucratic systems. And finally, we know that competency-based training is important. Competency-based standards need to be created in an inclusive manner so that we can reduce the turnover and ensure that everyone is getting the quality of care they need, that the workers are able to feel positive about themselves, knowing that they have the training required to deliver the high quality of service that all Manitobans deserve. The Green Party believes that these green jobs that we will create will enable us to serve one another more compassionately and have a positive impact on our environment. Thank you.
And that concludes our second set of responses. Candidates, how are we doing? A reminder, there's water underneath your podiums and there are chairs if you'd like to get off your feet for a moment, and you still will be visible to the audience and to those watching the live stream. The order for answers for priority issue number 3 will be Rochelle Squires, Nahanni Fontaine, Janine Gibson, and Dougal Lamont. Here is our issue summary. For many in Manitoba, having a disability has long meant living in deep and unrelenting poverty. It has also meant that having very limited housing options are there due to the growing shortage of accessible and affordable units in the rental market. Our third priority issue this afternoon is about doing a much better job of meeting the most basic of needs. And there are some things in the works. There is a newly launched provincial disability support program. Persons who qualify as having, quote, severe and prolonged disabilities, end quote, will get increased monthly benefits compared to employment and income assistance or EIA recipients, but many feel that the program has serious design flaws. Moreover, the income levels offered are still substantially below the poverty line. And there is a recently passed Federal Canada Disability Benefit Act. The act has been heralded as a once-in-a-generation opportunity by some to lift many working-age Canadians with disabilities out of poverty. But the program's full impact will depend on the provinces agreeing to not claw back benefits from their intended recipients, and also stopping private insurance companies from potentially doing the same. The prospects for improved housing options are much less promising, particularly for those on low incomes. It is reported over the last decade, Manitoba has lost 24,000 housing units that rent under $750 per month, and there are currently nearly 6,000 people on a wait list for Manitoba housing. To the floor now for our series of questions about this.
Thank you. My name is David Crone, and I'm with the Cerebral Palsy Association of Manitoba. My questions are, how will your party ensure that the participants and the disability community have leadership roles in improving and evaluating the new Manitoba Supports for Persons with Disabilities program? Second, does your party commit to not directly nor indirectly claw back the new Canadian disability benefit? And third, how will your party work to increase the availability of affordable and accessible housing? Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, you have 2 minutes to respond or rebut. Once again, I mentioned the order. It will be Rochelle Squires, Nahanni Fontaine, Janine Gibson, and Dougal Lamont. Representing the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba, Rochelle Squires, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to respectfully disagree with one of my colleagues' earlier statements. It was under our government that the wages went up from $12 to $19 an hour. Under the previous government, those wages remained frozen. And again, we have much more work to do in that regard. In regards to creating an equitable program, our government brought in the legislation to create the Manitoba Supports Program so that people with a disability do not have to continuously reapply for their benefits year after year. They do not have to continuously receive a doctor's note to receive those benefits to indicate that they are still living with their disability. And it is a more dignified program. We have also a more dignified way of rolling out the services, meeting people where they're at, and allowing people to apply for the benefits that they deserve at a more convenient way. We absolutely commit to an advisory council to review the implementation. We are in the very early stages of the Manitoba Supports Program. It was launched on April 1st, and it will take a full year, if not longer, to roll it out and ensure that everybody who's eligible will be on the program. And we will have an advisory council that will oversee the implementation of that. And regards to housing, our government recently announced 700 net new units of social and affordable housing for individuals as a number for this year, and we will be moving forward with higher targets in the following year. And in regards to the Canada Disability Benefits Program. I was very pleased to meet with my federal colleague, the Honorable Carla Qualtrough, recently to talk about this. Don't have all the details, but it is very exciting that the federal government are moving into this space in partnership with the provincial government, and the PC party commits to neither directly or indirectly clawing back those Canada Disability Benefit payments from all recipients, and we will move to exempt the Canada Disability Benefit in regulation for all Manitoba Supports recipients.
Thank you. Next to respond to this question is Nahani Fontaine, representing the NDP. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you much for that. The Manitoba NDP wants to ensure that people with disabilities can live with dignity and receive the benefits they need. I know that my colleague is talking about the Manitoba Support for Persons with Disabilities that they changed over. There are significant issues with that program, and I know that my colleague would have heard about some of them. But some of them, as we've heard from community members, is that now all of a sudden persons with disabilities have to reapply. It is then arbitrary for the department to decide which citizen actually qualifies for this new support system, which also requires that they receive a doctor's note that indicates an individual will have a disability a year out. So it's a little bit more, it's disingenuous for my colleague here to say that they've made significant changes. In fact, what they've done is they've put more barriers for people to access the dollars that they need to be able to to live and to thrive and to have the dollars that they need for food and for rent and all of those things. So I want to put that on the record as well. You know, a Manitoba NDP government under Wab Kinew, we commit that we will not claw back the benefits of the Canada Disabilities Program. I want to ensure that. And as well, we are committed to work with the community. One of the best ways to do that is to include people in the process. We believe that members of the disability community need to be directly involved in evaluating the new Manitoba Supports for Persons and recommending any changes that need to be brought forward. And certainly, as was noted just 2 nights ago, the Manitoba NDP are committed to building more social and affordable housing, juxtapose the PC government that has actually sold off hundreds of social housing units.
Thank you. Next to respond or rebut is Janine Gibson from the Green Party of Manitoba. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Miigwech. Green MLAs will ensure that leadership from the disability community are supported by increasing the training for those leadership positions, by listening more closely to the leaders that are already stepping forward, and by ensuring there are more community supports and agency supports through funding, adequate funding, to ensure that we have the supports of people that are wanting to enhance their lives by speaking and acting on behalf of their communities. I know were it not for the basic income program, when I was unhoused at 17 and the rooming house I was trying to get into was selected, I would not be standing here in front of you. So I'm very aware of how important housing is and how important a basic income guarantee is. So yes, a Green Party of Manitoba, Green MLAs would in no way claw back such needed income. In fact, it's my understanding that the current taxation level, people with disabilities lose more money being clawed back if they try to work than any other sector. It's around 85% of a tax level, which is just shameful. We have to separate supporting people in working in the community with their basic income supports and from the disability and ability supports that help them move to a position where they can take leadership positions, both paid and unpaid. And in terms of housing, we with the Green MLAs will definitely support the maintenance of existing social housing so that it can move towards carbon neutral and accessibility, as well as supporting the 1,000 new social housing units that are required to reduce the wait time and ensure that all Manitobans are treated with compassion and dignity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the final candidate to respond to this question is Dougal Lamont from the Manitoba Liberal Party. You have 2 minutes to respond or rebut anything.
Sure. Thank you very much. I do want to make a couple of points. Look, it is with respect to both my PC and NDP colleagues, they both froze wages, at least 5 years under the PCs and several years under the NDP as well before that. But the other is that people who are on disability on EIA have faced massive cuts over the years and freezes that in 2019, a person on EIA who has a disability was actually receiving $1,000 less per year than they did in 1989 and $850 less than they did in 1992, right? So our EIA system, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why this was a choice that any government has made, but that is the reality that for over 35 years, there has been virtually no change in the EIA system with some small changes for people with disabilities that still don't go far enough. So yes, absolutely. One of the things we'll do is make sure that we're working with program participants to get feedback, to see what's working, to see where there are breakdowns and so we can dynamically adjust the program to make sure it works as we roll it out. We're proposing a provincial guaranteed minimum income for individuals with disabilities, where people would be free to work and volunteer. And again, we would consult with program participants and leaders to ensure that issues are addressed. We do commit to neither directly nor indirectly clawing back Canada disability benefits payments. And the other is we've committed to building 10,000 new units of affordable housing, 1,000 units a year for the next 10 years, and to make sure that that is accessible as well. So it would actually, it would all be built with universal design. That's it.
Thank you. And that wraps our third area of issue. And we are right on time. It's 2 o'clock for those in the room who are watching our pacing. We're right on time for our debate this afternoon. And in fact, we will continue at a reasonable pace. How are we doing, candidates?
Good.
Thank you for this. It's hard work as someone who speaks 2 o'clock every morning. I know what that feels like in trying to articulate and get your thoughts out. So we appreciate you staying within our format this afternoon. I'll just give the audience a moment to make some adjustments. That time, I think, has prompted some people to shift seats. Maybe just a moment, since we are a touch ahead of time, in fact, to take a sip of water and get set for our our fourth section of issues. But if we could move very quietly, we are on to our next issue. And if we could ask you all to settle fairly quickly, please. Just meant to be a stretch break if possible, but not to leave. So there may be a bus leaving perhaps. I'm not quite certain what is happening in the room. Hello, everyone. Hello, if I could get everyone, please, who does not have to leave, back into their seats. We were just taking a moment of pause between issues. We still have an hour left in our format, and the candidates are about to answer the next section of questions. So while we respect some of you may have had to leave, those of you who are here, please have a seat as we get ready to repose our next section. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Now that we're regrouped and our candidates are ready, it's time to move on to issue number 4 in our discussion debate today. The fourth priority issue for us this afternoon relates to employment. Manitobans with disabilities continue to face extensive barriers when seeking a job, and once employed, keeping the job and advancing in their careers. Recent Statistics Canada data tells us that more than 57,000 or 40% of Manitobans with disabilities in their prime working years, age 25 to 64, are not employed or even seeking work. And research shows that both employees and employers benefit from hiring persons with disabilities. Employees benefit from a better quality of life with improved confidence, a source of income, and community participation. The benefits for employers include improved profits, lower turnover, increased punctuality and dependability, and an improved organizational culture. There are many reasons for the labor force discrimination faced by Manitobans with disabilities. These include limiting stereotypes held by many employers, limited supports to help students with disabilities move from high school to work life, and a lack of government funding increases from high school to work life. As well, over the years, too many community-based organizations that provide employment supports for persons with disabilities. Many believe the government should show much greater leadership in addressing these issues, as well as setting a good example when it comes to employing persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities make up 21% of the Manitoba population between the ages of 25 and 64. But in 2022, they were heavily underrepresented in public service, making up only 11% of provincial government employees. To our next section of questions, to the front row, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Graham. I'm the Executive Director of the Manitoba League of Persons with Disabilities. I have 3 questions here. How will your party work towards ensuring equity in employment opportunities and outcomes for Manitobans with disabilities within the government and broader economy? How will your party ensure that Manitobans with disabilities are actively and effectively promoted to the business community as valuable contributors to the workforce and economy? And the third question, how will your party work to improve transitions from high school to best prepare students with disabilities for future employment?
Thank you. Sticking to our format, candidates will have 2 minutes for a primary answer, a response or rebuttal. And the order for this section will be Hanny Fontaine from the NDP, Janine Gibson of the Green Party of Manitoba, Dougal Lamont of the Manitoba Liberal Party, and Rochelle Squires from the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba. You have 2 minutes, Hanny Fontaine.
Miigwech. Certainly, I think everyone in this room would agree that communities are stronger when all of us have the opportunity for employment. I think everybody would agree that employment is something more than just getting a paycheck. It is that which gives us a sense of pride, a sense of joy, a sense of being productive in our communities and in our families. Persons with disabilities are no different and certainly face a significant barriers in the workplace. And we know that certainly there's a lot more work that has to be done in that regard to ensure equity and employment opportunities and outcomes for Manitobans with disabilities. A Manitoba NDP government with Wab Kinew as the Premier will support community-based organizations that provide employment services for persons with disabilities. I said earlier in my opening comments that I had the opportunity to visit with Dash, and I actually had the opportunity to see some of the folks build their skills and the work that they do there, and the way that Dash has been able to organize themselves to be able to support a variety of different skills so that individuals can get employment outside. They have a really amazing program now. It's like a social enterprise. So they have a kitchen and folks are making soups and they're selling soups to community or to organizations that are around Dash. We have to be able to support that work and to think outside the box on how we can support Manitobans to get the skills that they need and to support them in their workplace as well. Sorry, so little time here. Again, we are committed to ensuring that Manitobans with disabilities have the supports that they need to be able to thrive. And that includes in the workplace and getting employment, which.
Thank you.
Not enough time.
Janine Gibson, next to respond, you have 2 minutes.
Merci. Green MLAs will support sale of green bonds to create green jobs. And those green jobs will include ensuring that there is equity in employment. We believe that one of the reasons that's not existing is there is a lack of training and community funding for that training, so that employers know that they are missing out on a lot of resources, that 1/4 of the population who have overcome issues with mobility or with issues with different aspects of abilities are able to make very important contributions in their community, both paid and unpaid, but hopefully with more supports to move folks from volunteer positions to paid positions. Secondly, we believe that funding for these education workplaces should include mentoring programs so that more folks with disabilities are able to see role models, people with like themselves who have moved successfully from high school education through university to various aspects of making contributions. We all have different strengths. We all have different gifts to share. We all have different challenges that we need to overcome. And in my experience, overcoming those challenges gives us a kind of wisdom that's deeper and more important than just knowledge. So that mentoring would play a key role in ensuring that more folks are able to share their gifts with the community. And in some ways, we need to listen to Mark Twain, who says, never let your schooling get in the way of your education. So that's, I think, the practical lived experience that can be honored through mentoring programs. Thank you very much.
Dougal Lamont, next to respond. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great question. I mean, one of the things we've actually want to do is start very early when it comes to screening people for any kind of disability in school. So one of the things that we know is that whether could be anything, eyesight, hearing, learning disabilities, we want to make sure that at the very beginning of a student's life that we're screening to make sure that we're able to detect if there's a disability and to be able to react. For in many cases, it takes years for a diagnosis, even though parents might know that our child is struggling. So that is one of the things that we'll do. Making sure that assistive devices are available is really critical. And look, there's an incredible range of people with disabilities, and there are all sorts of reasons why they're excluded from work. And some have to do with the built environment, and some have to do, frankly, with discrimination, as a young woman just mentioned. So part of this is we actually have to be very clear that about the value of people with disabilities in the workplace. The other more practical steps we're taking would be to introduce a $150 million Manitoba Works for Good program. And look, it would be for all Manitobans, any Manitoban who's facing unemployment, but it would certainly be for any individual with disabilities. You could go and work at a not-for-profit or at another job. The other is that we have a Manitoba Business Development Bank because folks with disabilities can be entrepreneurs and it can be very successful, to make sure that they have access to capital as well and build their own businesses. These are all, so we want to do it across the whole range of ability and disability. And finally, when it comes to making sure that people are graduating from high school, that's something we should be working on with all students to make sure that they're having a positive transition out of high school, but especially, kids with disabilities, who are facing greater challenges. Thank you.
And our final response to this area of issue is Rochelle Squires. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And in my personal life, I can wholeheartedly say that one of the greatest joys of my life has been planning for the future and looking at potential and opportunities in the workforce. And I'm sure many of you can agree. But sadly, I believe people with disabilities are often left out of that. They aren't given those same opportunities to dream about their future and the potential that they could unleash within them. And that is why earlier this year, the PC government announced a $600,000 Quality for Life Improvement Initiative. It is a pilot that is onboarding 2 groups of students, for the first group aged 18 to 20, and then another group of 20 to 25-year-olds, looking at opportunities and helping pair these young individuals with mentors who can help them aspire to achieving their goals in the workforce and achieving their destiny. Our government has also announced more increased amounts that you can, if you are on the Manitoba Supports Program, more money that you can receive without having any reduction in benefits, $12,000 $15,000 per individual and $18,000 per household, as well as one of the things that we are embarking, and what I would commit to you today is that with the new Intellectual Disability Advisory Council that was established earlier this year, and other stakeholders like Manitoba Inclusion and other disability advocates, that we would work to fully revamp the day services program within the province of Manitoba to ensure that there are choices there for those who want to continue with the traditional day services model, but also to have opportunities for career laddering, because that is an opportunity that all young people should be able to achieve. And like they say, if we can dream it, we can achieve it.
Thank you. Big round of applause. That wraps up this segment. We have one more section of issues to go. Oh, that was a little stressful when everyone started leaving there. And like I said, break. I meant sort of stretch the legs, but that was a bus that did have to leave for Beausejour. So I'm grateful that everyone safely was able to find their way out. And I think it also outlines one of the issues around having to schedule your transportation when you're trying to get different places, right? So thank you, everyone, for taking to your seats once again as we continue our debate and discussion this afternoon. A small announcement before our final area of for the candidates' responses. I just want to thank in advance here everyone who has been joining us online, with hundreds of people watching the debate online right now. Our original channel was overwhelmed. That is how many people were tuned in. So we have just opened an additional channel through Ability Manitoba's YouTube channel, Abilities Manitoba YouTube channel. That is the secondary channel, an additional channel. So if you are having issue, or you're hearing perhaps from someone you're here and you're hearing that there are issues, just please let them know there's a secondary channel now open to watch the remainder of our debate this afternoon. It's a good problem to have when you have that much engagement. And so to priority issue number 5, our final area that we will cover today relates to timely and equitable access to services and resources. Tens of thousands of Manitobans with disabilities and their families depend on timely access to various disability-related services. Recent studies have shown that many systems providing these services are struggling. Studies by the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth have reported systemic deficiencies, including long wait times, limited availability of services for children and families, most notably those in rural areas. Recently, community-based studies have also reported ongoing inadequacies in services and supports for persons with disabilities in our educational and healthcare systems. Wait times for disability-related services, including assessments, home care, respite, therapy, treatment, even essential equipment repair, can last for months or years, which leaves thousands of Manitobans and their families in crisis. While Jordan's principle has helped to provide more equitable access to services for First Nations children living with disabilities on reserve, huge disparities continue to exist in the services available to First Nations adults. Candidates, we're about to move to the question. I'll mention the order of the responses for this area. Janine Gibson, Dougal Lamont, Rochelle Squires, and Nahani Fontaine. Here are the questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Joni Wilson. I come here in a couple of capacities. I'm the Jordan's Principal Wellness Services Lead for Southern Chiefs Organization. I'm a parent of an adult son with disabilities. I sit on a number of provincial boards, committees, and advisory groups in the disability sector, and I am a First Nations and Manitoban voting citizen. My questions today are, what will your party do to ensure the comprehensive reduction of wait times for disability services? And how will your party ensure accountability and transparency? What will your party do to address the reported inadequacies related to disability services and resources and the serious limitations in educational healthcare services? And one that is near and dear to my heart, how will your party address the wide regional disparities in disability services and the inequities or lack of access that continues to be faced by First Nation Manitobans living on reserve? Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, 2 minutes for response or rebuttal, beginning as mentioned with the Green Party of Manitoba and Janine Gibson.
Miigwech, merci. Green MLAs in Manitoba will ensure that we have greater transparency in our government systems. Transparent wait times, with transparent timeline goals for when people's needs will be met, need to be available on websites, need to be available so that we can hold one another accountable for what we've agreed to do and ensure that we are doing it. You've heard many people say that we are supportive and want to ensure that these systems deliver services more equitably, but we're still not seeing that equitable distribution of resources. The Green Party believes that with more support workers in place, funded to help folks navigate the system, we can save money in the long run by investing in people today. This is our Green Jobs for a Green Future platform that includes support workers to help navigate the bureaucracies. I've had folks with disabilities come to me asking me to help them. They've been seeking to live independently for over 4 years, almost 5 years, without the supports that they need to make that move. So that kind of investment in support workers needs to happen in terms of implementing Jordan's principle, implementing the investment that our rural communities need so that all Manitobans, regardless of where they live, regardless if they are on the land or in urban centers, have the supports that they need to develop their abilities, to express themselves, to be treated with the compassion that all Manitobans need. A Green MLA will ensure that those in the governing parties stay to their promises and listen and act more attentively. Thank you, Miigwech.
The next 2 minutes belong to Dougal Lamont from the Liberal Party.
Look, Manitoba Liberals are committed to rebuilding the Manitoba Public Services. This is one of the things we see as absolutely essential coming out of the pandemic. And to be honest, the PC government for the last 7 years, there were a lot of cuts and freezes and a lot of cuts by attrition, which just meant that if somebody quit or left, they weren't replaced as a way of saving money. And as a result, and for many reasons, there are thousands fewer people working for the Manitoba government than there were just a few years ago. And that just means that the work can't get done. So we are committed to rebuilding the Manitoba Public Service to make sure that we're not just hiring, we need to invest in technology and processes to make sure that, and it's accessible technology to make sure that we're speeding access to service. We are committed to making sure that these benchmarks are reported publicly and to address the inadequacies. Again, we have to improve staffing levels. There just simply aren't enough people working in the system, and rebuilding education, healthcare, and disability services to make sure that if you're making a call or sending a text or sending an email, that there's somebody on the other line to answer it. And when it comes to the disparities in disability services for First Nations, it is really terrible. There are basically no disability services on First Nations for adults at all. And that shouldn't be the case. We'll work with First Nations. We believe in Jordan's principle, and the Manitoba government is funded per capita based on every single person in this province, whether they live on reserve or not, which means the provincial government is actually getting federal dollars for First Nations on reserve that should be shared with First Nations on reserve. That includes making sure that those disability services are there, of course, respecting First Nations sovereignty and working with them. But I think Jordan's principle, it should work as much for children as it does for everybody else. First Nations ultimately are all Manitobans, and we have a responsibility and a duty of care. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to respond is Rochelle Squires from the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I can think of no greater heartbreak or difficult decision that a parent would ever have to make than to be given the choice of putting their child in the CFS system when there are no protection issues at all, but really just to receive the services that they need for their child that has developmental or intellectual disabilities. And that is why our government had created an $8 million pilot project 2 years ago. And I would commit to that would allow those families that have adolescents that are struggling with significant barriers to receive those intense one-on-one services. And I commit to being transparent about the results of that pilot and consulting with community about making that a regular part of the budget on an ongoing basis. In the last year, we committed 5 million more for children's disability services and $21 million more to expand the capacity of the community living disability services to really move forward on reducing those wait times and ensuring that people are connected with the right services when they need them the most, and to ensure that there is adequacy and fairness and equity throughout the distribution throughout the province. Our government has been transparent, but we will certainly commit to greater transparency and working with all partners to ensure that regardless of where a person lives, if they're impacted with disabilities, that they will receive the right services that they need from the government of Manitoba.
Thank you. And the final candidate to respond with 2 minutes from the NDP, Nahanni Fontaine. You have 2 minutes.
Miigwech for that. Miigwech for the question and for the good work that you do at Southern Chiefs Organization. I had the very good pleasure of working there for 10 years. So I know that it's a very good organization. I agree with my colleague here that the wait times for disability services have reached unacceptable levels. And again, that's a consequence of cuts to the public service that the PC government has undertaken in the last 7 years. And so an NDP government will invest in expanded disability services across the province to address the backlog in a comprehensive manner. And we will offer transparent and reliable information on all wait times in respect of disability services. Just recently, our leader, Wab Kinew, announced that we would commit and fund the 5 additional wheelchair repair technicians positions that we need here in Manitoba to ensure that citizens have access to wheelchair repairs, which is simply unacceptable that we don't have those positions to begin with. We will commit to working with people to bring folks together with disabilities at the table to offer feedback and advice on health and education and social services on how to improve the system. And then certainly our NDP caucus is 100% committed to working with First Nation peoples on reserve and off reserve and Indigenous peoples in general in respect of adhering to Jordan's principle and supporting communities to be able to access Jordan's principles. As I'm sure you are well aware that sometimes there's still a disconnect and a gap in being able to access those services or Jordan's principles for folks that are on reserve. So we are committed to working with the federal government in honor of Jordan's principle and ensuring that First Nations people have the services that they rightly deserve. Miigwech.
And as our candidates prepare for closing statements, if we could just have a round of applause as we prepare to hear their final thoughts. For closing statements, each candidate will also have 2 minutes this afternoon, and the order for closing statements will be Dougald Lamont, Rochelle Squires, Nahanni Fontaine, and Janine Gibson. Dougald Lamont.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today, present our ideas. This is an incredibly important election. And look, I know that for so many Manitobans, you've been waiting for a very long time for change. And I don't see that change from the other parties. There's a gentleman in the front row who asked how we're all going to pay for this. And one of the ways we're going to pay for this is that we're not going to keep the property tax rebates. We're going to end those, except for the, we'll protect people at the bottom who need to be protected. But we don't think we should be borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars and sending it to people who live in other provinces who make a lot of money. That's money we could be putting into helping people here in Manitoba. And look, I know during an election, people talk about all sorts of different things. Right now, none of us actually have seats. Like, technically, no party has any seats at all, even though we're all incumbents up here, with the exception of Janine, sorry. But it is really, really important. If you look at what we're offering, if we look at our candidates that we have a phenomenal slate of candidates who you can have real confidence in voting for. So we are a real option and we want real change. And I think if you support us, you'll see that change happen. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Next, with the closing statement is Rochelle Squires from the Progressive Conservative Party.
Well, thank you very much, Marcy, and thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. And I appreciate all of your attention and listening to our ideas and debates, and for allowing me to be part of this journey. And it has been an honor of a lifetime to be on this journey with you for the last 3 years as the minister and as the MLA. Very fortunate that I have Saint Amant within my constituency of Riel, and I want to give a huge shout out to Saint Amant for all the wonderful work that you do and you continue to do. Wonderful partnerships, whether it be in expanding respite, providing service, being the center of excellence for autism, and all that amazing work that you do. Shout out to my friends from Saint Amant. In the last 4 years, our government has acted on the things that you had expressed desire to see move forward in the disability debate 4 years ago. We've kept our promise to take those initial first steps. We've raised the wages for the direct service workers. We have created the Manitoba Supports Program. We have moved towards full implementation of the AMA, and we are committed to taking further steps. We've kept our word in the past. We will keep our word in the future, that we will ensure that every Manitoban has the opportunity to live their fullest destiny in the province of Manitoba, that you can achieve gainful employment if that is part of your path. You will receive the services that you depend on, that you will have reliable workers who are fairly paid, and that you can live and play fully in the province of Manitoba with a re-elected PC government.
Thank you. And now a closing statement from Hanny Fontaine from the NDP.
So once again, let me just say miigwech to everybody in the room for attending. I agree with all of my colleagues here. It is an absolute honor and privilege to be on this stage, to be able to spend some time together, to listen and to, really engage in the democratic process that is so important. Again, I say miigwech to Disability Matters Votes, and for all of the work that folks have done to put together not only today, but previous events that I've been able to participate in. The Manitoba NDP, if you elect a Manitoba NDP administration, we are committed to working in partnership with Manitobans with disabilities, to listen, to consult, to hear your vision and your recommendations, and certainly to act on the needs of the community. I think that there is no greater commitment than to say that we will work in partnership with Manitobans on what is best for their lives and for their citizens. And so you have our commitment on that. As I indicated earlier, we are committed to increasing the wages for disability support workers that are on the front lines doing such important, critical work on behalf of all Manitobans, really. We are committed to the 5 positions for the wheelchair repair technicians. Again, that's something that should have been done a long time ago, but we are committed to doing it almost immediately. And then, of course, strengthening AMA. I'm very proud to be a part of a party that brought in that legislation, that demanded more from all of us, demanded and said that we can do more in this province to ensure that there is equity and that folks can thrive. And so finally, again, this is a really important election. I appreciate everybody's time and your vote matters. And we are up here to affirm that and say miigwech for the time today. Miigwech.
And a final closing statement from Janine Gibson of the Green Party of Manitoba. You have 2 minutes.
Miigwech, merci for your activism, for the hard work that your associations are doing, that brought you and us up here on this stage together to listen and dialogue with each other. We think this process is very important for investing in people and the basic human rights that you're asking for. Green MLAs will work for this end. We believe that we could fund this by reducing the billions of dollars in subsidies that go to profitable corporations in this province right now. We don't understand why profitable corporations are receiving money when we have a lack of basic supports for the staff to receive the funding and the training they need, and for all human beings in Manitoba to receive a basic income guarantee that ensures that they are lifted out of poverty and put on the track to healing and a healthy, fulsome life. We want to reduce the politicization of federal transfers into Manitoba to meet the needs instead of using these transfer systems for political posturing, which we have observed is a problem to accessing resources. We want to ensure that disability votes matter more by updating our democracy away from a first past the post system to proportional representation to ensure that every vote does matter and that you are listened to by a collegial political system that works together. Thank you. We want to move away from the first past the post to this proportional representation. And to do this, we ask you to think green and vote Janine and her green team. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you so very much. And I'll give you a proper thank you after some closing remarks that are important for everyone in the room, but we're going to applaud you twice. So let's just, right now, let's just applaud. It's really hard to do. It's democracy in action. It's very difficult to speak in code of time, as I said, and we so appreciate all of you today making time to be here for community. Thank you to the Victoria Inn. Thank you to Disability Matters Vote sponsors, Northway Pharmacy, Brannock Video, Visual Lizard Inclusion System, and Ebling Pharmacy. Thank you to those who have joined in person or via streaming. The importance of voting is also a basic human right. The importance of informed voting to help ensure that those elected to office best reflect the values and the agenda that you think are most important to support you. Is the way you do that is by voting on October 3rd. So how do you vote? There's so much information on the Elections Manitoba website on how to vote. The live stream of today's debate as well will be posted in the coming days on the DMVote website and on social media channels. All of the parties represented today have been provided with written answers on more detailed questions related to DMVote priority issues, and those will be posted to the DMVote website as well. DMVote has also asked different and more personal disability-related questions to all candidates running in the election that have email addresses. So DMVote will post those responses by September 20th. So there's a lot to be able to read and look into before you make your decision about who will represent you for the next 4 years. And so finally, and I'd like you to, let's just take our time. We're at 2:34. We have a moment. Individual rounds of applause for each candidate. It's hard work. So I'm just going to go in order of who is standing here, and I'll go down the line. So first, Rochelle Squires, Progressive Conservative Party in Manitoba. Thank you. Nahani Fontaine from the NDP. Thank you very much for being here. Dougal Lamont from the Manitoba Liberal Party. Appreciate your time today. And Janine Gibson of the Green Party of Manitoba. Thank you. Candidates, thank you for putting your names forward. Good luck on the 3rd. And I'll talk to some of you on CBC and maybe all of you in the weeks ahead. I'm Marcy Marcusa, 89.3 FM on CBC, and we invite you to engage in our ongoing election coverage. There's also a multi-party platform debate coming up with the leaders on the 21st of September. But thank you all for being a wonderful, attentive audience this afternoon. Be well, travel safe, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Marcy.